Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
You have an idea. I think going to these AI resources that we have, because it's trained on data from very smart entrepreneurs, from very great sources, and you say, hey, what questions should I be answering?
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory, walk.
Warning, this is a public service announcement. The Walk in Victory podcast is where we have conversations purposed to evolve lives. You may not want to evolve. Then tune into another bleeping podcast. Everyone else, enjoy the show. And here's our host.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory walks, I think I'm gonna. I got on a suit today because I had to go do some work, but I think I'm gonna start doing my interviews in a suit because I'm kind of liking the way I look mature. Usually I have on a hoodie or whatever, and I have a lot of suits and stuff that just kind of go to waste because everybody dressed down. I think I'm gonna go with the whole dress up approach, but that's neither here nor there. I started my first business. I didn't start the business. I was pulled into a business when I was 19 years old. Construction business. And if you've been a follower with us, you've heard me say this on a number of occasions. And I was green. I was fresh off the streets. So if you take into account business that I did on the streets, I grew up in a real rough neighborhood. Sold candy. Not like candy, like real candy. I sold candy. That was the first time that I ever had the entrepreneurial bug. I don't eat a lot of candy. I never really did, but I was a hustler, meaning like I didn't mind getting up and going. We lived in a project tenement where we had 13 stories and a bunch of housing projects around us, and I would go trick-or-treating. But I would start in the day and I would probably not end till night, and I would come home with bags and bags of candy. But I noticed, and this is the first point in business, the need. The kids in my class, I was in elementary school, they would eat the candy. Then they start coming down, but they have no more candy because they ran through their candy. So I would hold my candy, and we would have a candy called Now Laters. Now and laters, but we call it now later. So, when we condensed all of the words together. And for one pack of now and laters was 50 cents when I was coming up. Some places sold it for a quarter because they had 4 in the pack. Some had 6 in the pack. Then they had the big square tank taffy ones and all that other stuff. But I would take my packs apart and sell one for 5 cents. One, because they were itching for it, man. The candy rush was gone. Nobody had candy. They used to sell pretzels and all that other stuff in my elementary school, but nobody had what I had. I had that stuff that they needed, especially after Halloween. And so from Halloween so my mother used to always ask me, where are you getting all this money from? But I would stash my money, put it in the sock, stash my money away. I sent my kids to private school, and they were both in a private Catholic school here in Queens. And I got a phone call, and my son is 21, my daughter is 18. So they're 3 years apart. So you can imagine, but they would go buy candy. They're standing in front of and they're like, no, we got better product. So that mentality I kind of passed on, and I had to really tell, like, all right, you can't stand right in front of the people that you're going against and undercut them when, you know, so you got to learn parameters. I said all that to say today's conversation is going to be interesting because, again, I said I started at 19. I started selling candy when I was young. I was in the streets, so we did stupid stuff throughout those years, and I never discussed those things. I don't come on here to discuss horror stories. I come up on here to talk about walking victory. So you'll never hear from the time I sold candy to the time I sold a cabinet. That's not my conversation. My conversation is how can you prepare our next generation to think about wealth, generational wealth, business and entrepreneurial stuff. And I said this on previous episode, and I'm going to continue saying this. We are in a window, and it's probably going to be about a 3 to 3.5 year window where you can position your family, position yourself to create wealth like you've never imagined. Doesn't matter if you're a janitor. It doesn't matter if you are black. It doesn't matter if you're white. Because what's happening with AI and everything that's going on, if you position yourself now and becoming an authority at the ground floor, and I'm saying we're at the ground floor, you probably needed to be in it like 6 months ago, maybe 8 to 10 months ago, but it's still enough room that you can influence your audience. And I'm going to keep championing this cause because there's some people out there that can become wealthy and change your life by understanding what I talk about with other guests, but also as you see this journey. Christian, how are you?
I'm doing well. Really appreciate you having me on there. Love that story. I did the same thing growing up through school. I would buy these candies from an Asian market that nobody knew where these things came from. And I was selling them for way more
Yeah.
than I was buying them for. And, people are like, I can't find these anywhere. And they couldn't read the bags either. So they couldn't look it up or search it. And so I was going and selling it for, 5, 6 times what I was paying for it. And so love that story.
Yeah, so all right, so it was something in me that drove me to say, okay, I had a free marketplace where I can get the goods. And I went and I knocked on people's doors and trick or treat, trick or treat, trick or treat. You invested a little bit, but you saw that I can take this and I can mark it up. And there is a real sugar rush when you're amongst your peers. I wasn't into candy, but they were. And we met a need. If we was to simplify business, isn't that just all that business is?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we talk about internally with my team all of the time is what need are we meeting for somebody today? There's a lot of companies out there that are trying to build 4 or 5 years from now. Not to say that that's not a great business model or something to work on, but if you're trying to figure out how do you, especially if you're bootstrapped. My last company before this one, I had $100 and I put that entire $100 into that company. I had, a very smart person that I was working with at the time, and we each put in $100 and scaled that very rapidly, raised venture capital, etc. But yeah, if you're able to meet a need today, you really don't need necessarily a ton of startup capital if there truly is a need for what you're providing.
Let's go into your history. You talk about bootstrapping, meeting needs. First of all, I'm this year. I know people. I'll be 50 years old in September. How old are you?
I am 28.
When I was 28, I think I just lost everything I had when I was 28 or 27 when I lost 24. It was all those years meshed together. So everything came crashing down. I had money. I would walk around with all the money in my pocket and stuff but I didn't understand systems, infrastructure, the things that we're talking about right now. Where did you find from that, you going and buying that candy in China, in the area that nobody else understood, me knocking on doors saying trick or treat. Where did you find your infrastructure that you can now lead a team and say, hey, we got to meet the need, got to meet the need? That's the most important key element.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to grow up in a household that was entrepreneurial. My father, started his own business, did not want to go the corporate route, though he probably could have. And very early on, which is, why I loved you sharing about, kind of directing your kids on, really early on, hey, how do you kind of make it for yourself? Because it's so rewarding to be able to do that, right? And work on something and grow something. And so I did grow up with very early on when I had an idea, my father would ask me, he kind of encouraged me to have these ideas and then would really ask questions. How is this going to work? Is it meeting a need? Whose needs going to meet it? Are there other people already meeting those needs? And so asking really good questions about that, which is something nowadays, if you don't necessarily have that mentor or resource, number one, I always encourage looking for mentors. Mentors have gotten me to where I am today. But if you're not able to find that, asking ChatGPT. I mean, we do this for our new products, right? We say, we just created a new form to determine what products we want to build. And I, came up with some short kind of, hey, here are some of the things I think of. What else am I missing? What should we know or be thinking about before launching a new product? And ChatGPT did 90% of the work, right? And so
Yeah.
if you have an idea, I think going to these AI resources that we have, because it's trained on data from very smart entrepreneurs, from very great sources, and you say, hey, what questions should I be answering or should I know the answer to before I start a business or before I start this business? And it's going to give you a lot of great direction.
It's two things that I like about you already as an interviewer. I don't think that you're because we never met, we don't talk, but I like that you're succinct with what it is that you want to respond to. You're very clear. When did you realize that that was a gift? Because it is a gift. It's a gift to be succinct. Because if you're in a negotiation, if you allow your emotions to get involved, you might say something like, "We want to pay you the money anyway," right? But then, but there's a part of us that has to be reserved. Some people might call it cold or callous. There's a part that has to be still interactive. How do you develop your personality being so successful at an early age, where you don't seem to come off out of touch, where you don't seem to come off cold or callous, but you can still be interpersonal, but give just enough to make a person say, oh, okay, he understands.
Sure. I think it's a muscle, number one, and
Mm.
it's something that you have to train. I mean, I think some people are probably born or raised with that muscle a little bit stronger than others. But for myself, I've really had to focus even on the way I communicate. One of the things that a lot of people do, and I probably still not perfect with it, but I've gotten a ton better, is I used to all the time in between things that I was saying. And that really impacts how your message is received. You don't seem as concise, you don't seem as clear. And I've worked really hard on training that muscle and recognizing kind of the more times you chat with people, the faster that muscle becomes and the stronger that muscle becomes. In terms of trying to talk to different people, my life has been a little bit up and down. I mean, I grew up in a pretty upper middle class household, and then I made some choices going through college and through high school that kind of estranged me a little bit from my family, and so I wasn't really in that at all, right? I mean, I was not living an upper class lifestyle by any means. And so I guess I've kind of been on both sides of the fence there and learned a lot and yeah, and interacted with all kinds of different people and
So how
yeah.
did you learn? You learned what you learned from your childhood, but the juxtaposing positions, being someone who grew up and can say, hey, and you say honestly, I grew up in upper middle class. You chose to go down to wherever it is that you did, right? But do you think that there's a nice blend of the two where you can understand a person that has probably fell or lost and a person that already obtained and gained, and how do you blend that message for you and your company and your brand?
Sure. So we really focus on I've surrounded myself with a lot of really great people, and that's something that's super
Yeah.
important in business as well. Is if I don't personally have those experiences, then finding somebody who does have those experiences so that you can
Mm.
message is super important. We've got 55 people that work with us, and yeah, all of them have lived different lives than I have, and they've all lived different lives from each other, right? And that's part of what makes I think us so successful is that diversity of people that we have on our staff who have lived different lifestyles and are able to communicate differently and also look at things differently than I would through my experiences or through anyone else on the team and their experiences.
So people probably sitting there asking, what the hell does Christian do? Explain to us about who you are and what your company is, and what are you improving the world on?
Sure. So I've always been very entrepreneurial and I've always really tried training that muscle. As I said, when I was in school, I was selling candy. And then my first, I guess, business was when I was 9. And I got a $10 loan from my father at 1% interest. And I went and bought Otter Pops and some ice, stuck it in a cooler, and walked along the beach selling Otter Pops, right? And did that for an entire day. Didn't make a ton of money, but made some money and learned it. I mean, a ton of invaluable experience just through that about, taking this loan, paying back this loan. I mean, my father wasn't trying to make any money off of that, right? He was just trying to help me train that muscle as I brought up earlier. And from there, when I was 13 years old, I started my first business with 2 employees. One was based in Brazil and one was based in China.
Whoa!
And
Stop. See, as an interviewer, I can't just let you pass that by. You're 13 years old. You have now from 9 years old to 13. What was the business? We got to slow down here.
sure.
China and Brazil. You got a workforce now. What were you doing? Just elaborate just a little bit. We're going to fast forward, but I just need our audience to hear.
Yeah, so another thing is working in a space that you understand or love. If you have any kind of, I call it, people call it unfair advantage, right? Where
Hmm.
you've had this experience, my unfair advantage, or even just what I loved was a video game at the time called RuneScape. Uh, Essentially a game where you go in and play multiplayer, you can interact with other people, there's marketplaces, there's all of that, and then there's an in-game currency called gold. There were a lot of people. I was a 13-year-old with a lot of time, but not a lot of money. And there were a lot of people who had a lot of money, a job, but not a lot of time who liked playing this game. And so what I would do is essentially was a little bit techie at that point. I spent a lot of my time on the computer and found that there were these forums and websites where people would essentially say, hey, look, I work a 9 to 5. I don't have time to play this game, which is a very grindy game. And what that means is essentially you sit there for hours and hours mining rocks to level up your account to, be able to mine better rocks. And so these people said, I don't want to sit here mining rocks all day, but I do want to be able to, collect the best resources in the game. And so I said, hey, I will go and I'll level up. I'll sit there and mine those rocks for you in exchange for compensation. And so they would pay me to do that. I started getting enough people that wanted me to level up their accounts that I then went and tried to find other people who had time and didn't have a lot of money, right? And so it started with me doing all the work. Then it went to me having 2 people, one in Brazil and one in China, who would do the work. And it was my job all day to just find new people who wanted to get their accounts leveled up. From there, I went and hired a developer to essentially create a computer program that would then go and mine the rocks for me. All
You
right.
ain't need
And
the people no
so,
more.
yeah, well, no, we kept the people because
Yeah,
these things were not perfect. Right. And so now it wasn't just their job to mine rocks on one account anymore. It was to make sure that this computer program didn't stop
yeah,
breaking
yeah. Got
or
you.
didn't break.
So you
And
you
so,
shifted their roles.
correct. Yeah. So they essentially went from mining the rocks themselves to, managing 10 computer programs and making sure that they were working the whole time mining the rocks. I say mining the rocks, there was a lot of other,
Yeah.
skills in the game, but just for simplicity's sake, mining the rocks. And really learned a ton there. I mean, I learned that how to talk to people, right? I learned that not everybody goes into business deals with good intentions, right? So learning about when to take money up front, how to split something so that it's fair between the buyer and the seller, and just also learn the importance of reputation. If you're able to
Mm,
build up a positive, because these websites had these things called vouchers. Since it's online, you don't really know who everybody is, don't know where they live. They will, where somebody can post and say, "Hey, I vouch for this person." And so I collected it on your profile. I collected a ton of vouches and really realized at that point how important that reputation is, and that if you don't have a positive reputation, people are going to go somewhere
yeah.
else, even if it's more expensive. And so you can charge more for that positive reputation and get a lot more business than somebody who otherwise is trying to take super shortcuts.
So let me ask you something else, and I'm not, and I know I'm stuttering because I got an 11-year-old son too. I have a 21-year-old, 17-year-old. She's in music, he's in music. But then I have an 11-year-old. I want to be in business, right?
Hmm.
How valuable? So this is a personal question for me. How valuable, or how much did you lean on to your dad to help you as you develop this, or did you feel confident enough to say, I'm going to develop this without him just so I could show him what I've done?
So I got kind of the nudge from my father this entire time. I'm not sure. Granted, when I was 13, that was a while ago. I
Yeah.
don't remember that he was all that involved in what I was doing at that point. I'm sure I asked him questions, but I don't think I directly said, "Hey, I'm playing a video game all day and I have
Yeah, yeah. And
people."
I want to know about, yeah, yeah, like how
Yeah.
to level up. Yeah.
Exactly. But my father made it very clear to me that I can ask him these questions, and I used to go on hikes with him as well, where I would I've always been very curious, and I think that's something that has been an asset for me, absolutely. Kind of growing up throughout my whole life is just being curious. And so we would go on hikes and I would ask him questions all the time about, what do you think about this? And he would answer the things he knew. And if he didn't know it, he would say, let's look it up. Let's try and find it out.
Yeah,
Right.
because in business, it's not really about the thing that like you was doing at that time, video games. So it's really not about the game. It's how do we solve the problem?
Exactly. And that problem was these people did not have time to play this game the whole time, but they wanted to be a high level in the game. Right. And so that was a problem. And I don't think I had the wherewithal at 13 to really realize, okay, this is the problem I'm solving versus, and what is my competitive edge or competitive advantage over the other people trying to solve the problem. But I did recognize where I was in terms of I'm willing to do this. And the money that these people are paying me is more valuable than the time I'm putting into me.
S-
Right.
When did you begin to understand? You're 13. You had this idea. You went from candy. You went to video games, something that you love. Both things that all kids love. When did you start to understand and it start to click? Competitive advantage, meeting a need, all of these pillars of successful business, to where you built a $1 million business at an age that most people would d- d- beg to build in a lifetime. When did you start to really say, oh, okay, this is what my dad was saying? Or if you had other coaches, this is what the coaches are saying. This is what I've been trained to see. When did that happen?
I think kind of when I was 19 and I started my last company, Chatterpot, was where I really started understanding that, because my video game business wasn't super social. I wasn't leaning on a ton of different people. It was more in terms of I wasn't interacting with other entrepreneurs, which is super helpful to learn from and understand it and grow. Once you start interacting with other people who have been through it, and that's the beautiful thing about the entrepreneurial community, is so many people are willing to help. They realize how tough it is. It is being an entrepreneur is not easy. It depends on what you're doing and what you're trying to build, but either way, it's something that not a lot of people understand, the problems and the stresses and the issues that you go through as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of other entrepreneurs have a lot of sympathy for that. And in general, I would say the community is very willing to help other people because they realize how difficult it is. It's not something, I mean, Elon Musk talked about one of his, founder friends who had done very well, built a company, sold it for 60 million. And Elon asked him, hey, why don't you start another one? And he says, because I truly believe starting a company is like chewing on glass and staring into the abyss. I mean, it is very difficult. There is so much stress, and you really have to want to do it. And if you want to do it and other people in the entrepreneurial community see that, they're often willing to help.
Yeah, I never heard that quote before, but that is what starting a new project is like. I have several projects that's going on, and I've been an entrepreneur all my life, so I get excited. If you take on investors, if you're listening, I get excited when I build a project and it can pay for itself within a year and a half. I'm like, oh, we on to something, because if it can pay for itself, then I can scale it up. I've learned if I build a project and it can't pay for itself within a year and a half, it might not be a good project. It may be good, but I might need to refine it, or I may need to scrap it. If you ask for people to invest, if you ask a novice that's not entrepreneurial to invest, they're looking for 2 weeks. Hey man, hey Christian, how's everything going? hey Christian, you said you was doing that thing, like how we looking? And if you explain it to them, they don't really understand. Talk to me about when at 19 now you're starting to scale up. You've amassed a certain amount of credibility, a certain amount of success. Were you still in college?
I was, yes.
Did you graduate?
I did. My
Reluctantly.
college
You sound so reluctant.
No, I guess my college journey was 8 years long. Most people's is 4. I
Yeah.
kept dropping out because I got excited about a business that I was running where I needed more time, and ended up graduating because I was close, right? I there was and I'm so glad that I did. I think it was, it makes me feel a lot better having done so,
And
but I didn't
completely
have the
something.
traditional. Sorry?
Well, let's talk about that though. Seriously, in your entrepreneurial journey, because I just had to have this conversation with myself. Completing something, like, even if once you get to the point where he's like, I don't really don't need this, but just having that satisfaction that comes, the dopamine. In fact, I teach mindfulness and yoga and all that stuff too. So the impact that it has on the mind when you start something and you complete it. How did that feel for you? Even though you had to do an 8-year journey, you probably was making more money than everybody. You probably was making more money than your professors. But it still made you feel what?
I think it goes back to it's a muscle as well. Getting things done and following things kind of through to the end is super important, and especially as entrepreneurs, because it's a hard journey. That might sound like a theme throughout my conversation here, but it really is a difficult journey, and there's going to be incredibly high highs and incredibly low lows, right? When you brought up you had some, one of your businesses blow up. I mean, that is a low low. And if you're working a 9 to 5, you're not going to experience just that. And the stakes can be a lot higher if you're running a business, especially if you've taken loans or you have investors or, credit, right? I mean, if the business blows up and you still, if you did it like a small business loan, you still owe that loan, right? That doesn't go away. And so I've grit is super important, and I would say that I've really worked on training that muscle to be resilient and finish things. And you get the dopamine hit, and as I said, when I say muscle, you're training your brain about the importance of finishing things and getting through things, and that impacts other areas of your life for sure.
Some would probably say, all right, Christian, I know your dad was super supportive. He was an entrepreneur, and I know your background. Like, if one of your friends is listening to this, and if ever you would have fell on your face, your dad would have just came and lifted you up. What would you say to that? How much did you not want to? Because I know the entrepreneurial muscle. You would, I would, and I have. I was living homeless. I didn't want nobody to know. I thought when I came around like I was the last time they saw me, but that wasn't who I was. How is that for that progress for you? Because every entrepreneur has to go through highs and have to go through really low lows. What was the resiliency inside of you, young man, to say, I'm not going to ask, I'm not going to lean on nobody else. I'm going to pull myself out.
Yeah, great question. I absolutely have an unfair advantage over some people, having had my not everybody has their parents, as supportive as mine were. I can say for Undetectable, my current venture, I didn't get any investment from my parents. I did not, raise a single dollar from any family members and kind of did all of that. But at the end of the day, I did have a base that some other people did not have. That does not mean that other people can't train those muscles. They just have to, I guess, be a little bit more deliberate about it on their end. And that's where these resources, and I bring up those resources like ChatGPT, is super helpful for people. I had that advantage with my father believing in me and saying, you should try it. He would help me ask those questions that I brought up. But at the end of the day, it was me deciding that this is the journey that I wanted to go down. And it wasn't always great. I mean, towards the beginning, I had my last company acquired, but it was not what most people would consider a successful exit, right? So we raised a ton of money and, we're bought, but not for, a massive, it's called multiple. So it wasn't for anything like way more than the investors. And so what a venture capital or investor is looking for is, hey, I'm investing my money in a risky spot, which just about any startup is a risky spot. And they didn't get their 100x return, which is what most venture capitalists are looking for. They're saying, hey, if I wanted just a few percent a year, I would invest in the stock market. That's not what they're looking to do. I'm sorry. I feel like I haven't quite answered your question,
No,
but
you have, because what you did right there, you was like showing somebody, one, what venture capitalists are looking for, two, your vulnerability. Yeah, and you're admitting, all right, mate, I have had some advantages, but that doesn't exempt you from the grind.
right.
Right? Just because Dan Marino's my dad don't mean that I can play football. Right?
Sure.
And what happens is, I don't know what your dad was into, or your mom, like what your family was into. when you walk in the room, they're like, "Oh, that's such and such." That so you might be able to get a meeting, but if your product is crap, what they're going to tell you at the end of the day?
Even more than that, I'm in a completely separate space in the rest
Yeah,
of my family, right? And even
so
with some of that,
really
I've
though,
had
yeah.
yeah, I've been fortunate that I can run things by my father, but with my first company, I was really focusing on how do I grow social media following.
Mm.
And that's not my father's area of expertise either. And he's going, why does that matter how many followers you have? How is that helpful? Right. And it's my response or thought was, hey, I can grow this and use that as a base to distribute my product or my service to people. And so yeah, it has not been directly introductions or one on one that's gotten me where I am.
And for because someone would say, not me, someone from the outside would say, "Well, you're a young man and you're successful," so they would actually look for the root of your success. And what I want to get across to our audience is that the root of your success is you.
I would agree with that. Yeah, and it's I've heard the kind of allegory, I guess you would call it, of a ladder, right? Some people start higher up on the ladder than other people do in terms of, having more resources to start with. But I mean, there are plenty of people with millions of dollars who blow it all, right? Just because they had that advantage, they fall off the ladder.
We
They do
had a
not continue.
president, not this president, but we had a president, George W. Bush. He was he had the Texas Rangers, bankrupt them. He bankrupt like 5 companies. And I'm not talking against the president. And I love our presidents, but this is a fact, and you can go look it up. So just because somebody gifts you or you have anything doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. And I'm sorry to cross cut you, but go ahead and finish that thought. I just wanted to give our audience that.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think if you look at it as, oh, I don't have what that person had, and so I'm not going to be successful, then you're not going to climb up the ladder.
Hmm. What are we doing now? It's 2025. We have we're in the apex because I don't think we've reached the peak of AI. We're in the climb, the ascent. Apex means, but the ascent, because I probably use apex wrong. We are in the ascent of AI, where there's a lot of people that can change their lives if they just took the time to do that. What is your message? What would be your message to entrepreneurs who may be struggling a little bit in the online market? You kind of understand it, explaining them what it is that you do and explaining them the opportunity that can come with, I believe, within the next 3.5 to 4 years. There's a tight window, but if they do A, B, C, and D, you got the floor. I'm done.
Yeah, if you look at these new technologies and really try to stay up to date with them, like make it a second full-time job or even part-time job, anything you're able to do to stay up to date with all the new technologies that are coming out and all of the new, I mean, there is so much being disrupted. If you keep your eyes open and think about, is there a need here that I can help? Even if you're not building software, if you're not the one building an AI company, things like that, but you understand that AI technology and how it works, there's all of these AI sales development representatives, which means like salespeople that are being built and released right now. Most companies don't know what to do with that. Most small businesses have no idea, don't stay up to date on what's late. And so, if you're able to understand these technologies, you can even do something like create a service where you're going and helping connect small businesses with these new technologies to give them an advantage. That's something that all businesses are looking for, is how do I find an advantage, or how do I reduce costs, or how do I increase my ability to reach out to people. That was, I guess, one of the things I forgot in my journey was one of my businesses that was the one at 19, was this one. The Chatterquant, my last company, was at 21. When I was 19, it was reaching out to small businesses who didn't have a presence on Google. I didn't work for Google. I didn't do anything like that. But I just said, hey, you're able to go and put a square, a box on the internet. So when someone looks you up, it'll show your phone number, it'll show your website, it'll show pictures, and we see it all the time. If you look up a restaurant, it says call, reserve, book, things like that. A lot of the businesses in the area I was living didn't have that, and so I just called and said, "Hey, I'm going to connect you to technology," and that was hugely valuable to them, and I charged for that service, right? So if you're able to do something there and you really understand what's going on in AI, you have a huge leg up, and people are very willing to pay for that and pay a lot of money for that because it's so new, and you are starting kind of, as you said, 6 months ago, 12 months ago really was the ground floor, but we're still at the very beginning. And so there's nobody with 20 years of experience, and
No.
I don't want to say nobody, but very, very, very few people with 20 years of experience in AI, right? Especially compared to the demand for AI. And so if you're able to tap into that and really try and understand how it works, understand how to build a prompt on ChatGPT, you've created a lot of value that you can then add, whether you want to stay working for a company or go and start your own business. There's so much opportunity there. And with all of these new AI agents, for instance, if you understand how to use an AI agent, you'll have 10 people who want to come and hire you or purchase from you. And so there's just so much new technology. If you understand that technology, you're going to be valuable within the workforce or whilst building a company. And so that would probably be the biggest advice I'd have, is just stay up to date, try to learn and stay curious about these new technologies, because if you understand them, most people will not, and you're going to be very valuable, whether it's through building a business or through just a 9 to 5.
I'm building the AI, a few AI agents now, and when I took on the task, I was like, oh, because I didn't know about APIs, I didn't know about all of the the,
Sure.
the back end stuff. That I'm like, oh, it seems so. So I started with courses. I was taking some courses, and then as you taking courses, for me, like my mind starts to work quick. I'm like, oh, okay. So I liken stuff to this. I'm like, oh, this is like this. This is like that. Then the best thing that I've done, and I want you to close, we're gonna close on this, was understanding prompt engineering. Before you try to stick your toe into any of this stuff, how you prompt, how you talk to the devices. One of the things that I learned about prompt engineering, and I thought it was that it was cute and clever and funny, but it's also the way that a guy would pick up a girl, right? You give good compliments. Oh, you're so helpful. It makes the engineer, the thing that you're talking to, give you a little bit more by being kind, by being gracious, by having gratitude. When you look at where people are struggling at, for me being 50-year-old and not being able to understand this new model, what would you say?
I mean, I would say it's looking into courses, just like you said. 9.5 out of 10 people aren't going to do it. And so if you're willing to do it, you're going to have a leg up. I guess I have said that a lot, but really trying to find your unfair advantage. And if you don't have one, how do you
How
get
do you
it? How do
cultivate?
you go and find it?
That?
And your time and effort is enough to get there. If you're willing to put in the time and effort and other people aren't, then that's how you can create or hone that unfair advantage. In terms of prompt engineering, the thing I always think about is that don't give it extra information that it
Yeah,
doesn't need, but make sure to give it everything that it does need.
does
If you
me.
go if you go and say it's a 30-degree day outside, I really want to do this, but please write me a poem about this. It's going to get confused by that additional, it's a 30-degree day outside. And so giving as much information as succinctly as you can to ChatGPT or any of these AIs, recognizing that they're trying to build it so you can chat with it as every day as possible. but you will be a lot more effective by trying to think, what is something that it needs to know or would be helpful for it to know, and how do I not include anything that's not helpful for it?
Oh my God. I'm glad that you said that because when I was 22 years old, and I just got kicked out of college for the second time. And I was going through, but I wanted to write. And I developed the muscle for writing. I bought all of these books and I started to read about words, syntax, context, and all these things, and breaking down words, etymologies, and yada, yada, yada. Because I talked a lot, but sometimes you just don't know what you're saying. But once I learned the science of writing, one of the things that I can't remember what books, words work. You talk about cut the fat that you don't need. That's prompt engineering. It doesn't matter that it's 30 degrees out today. Take that out. People don't really realize how to communicate effectively in person. So it's going to be 10 times more difficult in marketing, 10 times more difficult in AI, 10 times more difficult in finding your customer. When you are able to streamline your message and really, really get down to the grassroots of what it is that I'm selling, what it is that I want to communicate, then you'll be better. I usually ask people for the last question what books have impacted them. But because I'm so impressed with you and your resume, this is what I want to ask you. And we're going to archive this. If I have this conversation with you 10 years from now, you're 30 something years old, I'll be almost 60, and we sit down again, what would have happened between now and then?
Oh man, I that question scares me a little bit. I don't want to assume anything, and that's again part of, I think, what's going to hopefully keep my business and myself successful is recognizing that there's always going to be somebody else that's trying to, take the spot you're in or take market share from you. And so I guess what I'm hoping is that I maintain my drive, I maintain my willingness to work with people, to connect with people, to treat people well, especially the people, on my side, and that I will continue to grind. That's what I hope has happened in 10 years, because any of the other stuff I want is not going to happen if I don't do
Do
those
those things.
things.
And there you have it, everybody. I told you we sit you at the feet of the masters. As you heard, me and Christian went deep, like into AI, into business, into mindset development. And I know that you got key takeaways. We don't ask you for cash apps. We don't ask you for Venmos. I'm not begging for donations. But what I do beg for, please hit like, please hit subscribe so that we can get these conversations out to the world. I don't want to have this conversation like a tree falling down in the middle of the wilderness. Nobody hear it. I want to have these conversations where they resonate with people and then we can help impact other people's lives. And because of you, we've been able to do that. So let's keep it moving forward. If this is your first time listening, if you're listening on a platform where you can leave a review, give us that 5-star review, tell us what you liked about the conversation, and that will also help. If you can't do that on the platform that you're listening to, then go to our website, walkinvictory.me, and you can leave it there. Enjoy the rest of your day. Don't walk making excuses. Don't walk holding your head down. Don't walk feeling guilty because you may have a little bit of a leg up than somebody else. Nah. Go down, help somebody come back up with you and bring them where you are. Set your business so that you can be a intricate part of financial growth for somebody else. And Christian has the last say.
Yeah, if I guess I just wanted to throw out there, along with what you were saying there, if anybody is looking to start a new business or wants to talk something through, I'm happy to keep my door open. I'd love to keep my door open. reach out to me on LinkedIn, Christian Perry, or email me cperry@undetectable.ai. So CPERRY@undetectable.ai. And I'm happy to chat with anybody who's looking to become an entrepreneur or just trying to figure things out.
And that's what we say. All of Christian's information is in the description. Under his name with his company is going to be a line. That line means to click and go to him and get that clarity call. If you have a young, I really want to say this before I go. If you have a young man, a young woman, don't discourage them from business. Link them with somebody. If they have that entrepreneurial spirit, you may not have ever started a business, but that doesn't mean that they can't do it. You just don't know how to direct them to do it. Or maybe your voice is mute to them, but they can still join this victory walk. Together we can walk in victory. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace. Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening and or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory walks, you know what? I'm going to stop this.